Welcome. We are doing another update of our Calexit group. Occasionally, we meet to talk about reasons why Calexit is still a good idea. And this is being brought to you by the people who started the entire Calexit movement and are still here, and members of members of the original Yes California organization. A lot of us are still here, still in the movement, still trying. Let's get to a little bit of what today's show is about. We're going to show you some news of things that are going on right now to prove that there's still good reasons why to Calexit. So we haven't stopped. We're still here. We're just waiting for good information to come out. Largely, what we've been covering is that Joseph Biden is another Trump. And by that, I mean that so recently, we were told that Donald Trump placed kids in cages, Latin kids in cages, and then that's what made him racist. And then we were told that he wanted to expand the border wall, and that's what made him racist. And then we were told that he wanted to have migrants who were trying to come to America because they were in terror for their lives have to stay in Latin America while the paperwork got filtered out, rather than being able to stay in America while their asylum application was processed. Well, all three things Joseph Biden has done exactly like Trump. Kids in cages, now called containers. Border wall, now called continuing the wall. Refugees have to stay in Latin America, now called it's the so this came out this week. So basically, Biden has kids in cages.
I hate to interrupt. I'd just like to say, I know what Vice President Kamala Harris calls it, and that's just don't come here. just don't.
Right. And Joseph Biden also said it's fine. The situation on the border is fine. What I like to point out to all Californians is that we saw Donald Trump talk about kids in cages, put kids in cages, increase the border wall, and keep refugees in Latin America rather than them stay here. And we were told that those are all examples of white supremacy and racism in America. Well, now Joseph Biden has done all three things. That's a fact. So the kids in cages, they call it containers. It's the same thing. The border wall, they call it continuing the wall now. I remember seeing Kerry Jean-Pierre argue with Peter Doocy about that. It's the same policy. And now this week or last week, they continued the Trump policy of leaving refugees in Latin America instead of letting them stay here while the paperwork's processed. So that's three of the most racist against Latino Donald Trump policies, all continued by Joseph Biden. So I'm not making that up. You won't hear the Democratic Party in California or in America talk about this or mention, hey, we really slammed Donald Trump for these things. Why are we doing the same things? But that's what's going on. So that's there. Joseph Biden, another part of Trump, exactly the same as Trump to Latin people as Donald Trump. Also, let's recall that Joseph Biden had Kamala Harris go to Latin America and tell people not to come to America. So, I mean, we were disgusted with the way that Donald Trump made America look to Latin America and the foreign world. Well, under Biden and Harris, they literally told Latin America, don't come to America. We've never said anything like that in 200 years. Our message was always, give me your poor, you're tired, you're hungry. Democrats went out there and said, yeah, don't come. You're poor, you're tired, you're hungry, don't come to America. These are all facts. These have happened. Anyways, that's just the start. So this is Calexit LLC meeting. We include members of the Yes California group. We are the original founders of the Calexit movement. I started the whole thing. Jason's been here since day one. The movement got started. We were the people who running the Calexit Congress, and we were the ones that have the connections to the other independence movements. So in today's news, we're going to get into some more news. Reasons why Calexit is still a good idea. Now, obviously, we talked about how Joe Biden is another Trump, and we listed out some reasons why. But there are other reasons why Calexit is still a good idea. This is all news reports that came out recently, so we're going to cover those for you now. In San Francisco Gate, which is linked to the San Francisco Chronicle, California tech transplants are unhappy with the exodus to Austin, a report says. The problem, even though as high-profile companies and power brokers like Elon Musk move to the area, the tech scene remains nascent compared to California's, according to Insider. There exists a differential in talent density between Austin and Silicon Valley, one founder investor told Insider. Even as Austin gains a foothold as the tech hub, talent remains concentrated in the Bay Area, meaning more successful companies and therefore more talent. The effects compound. To put it simply, a growing tech sector doesn't automatically equate to Silicon Valley levels of dynamicism. That's not just the city's comparatively underdeveloped tech scene that disappointed Insider's resources. The traffic is thick and there's no reliable public transportation because they don't believe in that in Texas like we do here in California. Also, they're situated in 100-degree heat, unlike Los Angeles and Silicon Valley. So that's the point. When Elon Musk went and he took Tesla and other companies to Austin, there was all this talk about how all the tech companies are going to Austin, they're going to Miami, they're going to leave California. California's not going to be a tech hub. And the first thing I said was that's going to totally fail because you cannot recreate Silicon Valley. I discussed this in my book in 2012. Israel, India, China, Europe, New York have all tried to recreate Silicon Valley and all have failed. They have tech hubs, sure. New York has a tech hub. I think it's called Avenue 87 or something, and they got a lot of tech companies on one street. Nowhere near Silicon Valley. They don't, and the other part of it is you can't just create a tech hub. Silicon Valley is uniquely part of California culture. The tech industry there is uniquely part of California culture. It's let's experiment just to see what happens. Let's try new ideas. Let's not be afraid of failure. Let's do different things. Let's try to see how we can reach out to people. Steve Jobs, who really was the epitome of the Silicon tech sector, was a hippie who wore flip-flops and traveled to India and practiced Buddhism and died because he didn't believe in traditional medicine and he did like Asian homeopathic therapies. It's not just I'm good at computers. There's an attitude of exploration and a willingness to explore and a willingness to be wrong and a willingness to have projects fail. A lot of Silicon Valley got started because people were willing to invest millions of dollars into projects and they failed because they wanted to experiment. They weren't punished and told, now you're destroyed, leave the industry. A lot of America and the world doesn't operate that way. I'm sorry, did we invest $100 million into your company and it failed? You're destroyed now. Your reputation is ruined. We don't view it as, wasn't that fun and experimental and we learned lessons? That's the attitude of Silicon Valley. Also, it's the culture from California, open, free, multicultural, explorative. That's Bay Area culture going back to Jack Kerouac, and at least maybe the 1800s, maybe 1945, when all the LGBTQ people started really making a community there in San Francisco. So there's cultural dynamics, there's weather dynamics, there's historical dynamics. And a lot of people have made this mistake that if we just get a bunch of techies and put them in one city, poof, Silicon Valley. It's failed. Look around the world. Bangalore, China, Israel's, New York, they can't recreate what we do here. And I remember seeing an interview with Elon Musk a few months ago where he had to admit that he really thought everybody was going to follow him to Austin. And most of his colleagues never did. That came out months before this article or survey came out, where Elon was having to admit quietly on talks like, yeah, I thought a lot of people were going to follow me out of California. And they just said, okay, bro, you do well over there. And they never left. And the tech sector never left and the talent pool never left. And now it's not working This is exactly what we said. Toyota left California, went to another state. Toyota products dropped in technological ability and they lost sales. They're like, well, we're going to move outside California because it's cheaper. I'm sure it is. And you cut yourself on the talent pool, and then you had a substandard product, and then you lost market share immediately. And then Elon Musk did the same thing. I'm going to move out here. It's cheaper. Everyone will follow me. No, you don't have the tech talent pool. And that's exactly what got Toyota to lose credibility and technological ability and lose market share. You're doing the exact same thing. So we predicted this was going to happen when it left. We predicted it was going to work out. And we were one of the first or only people pointing out how Elon Musk was now having to admit no one followed him. I didn't see anyone else covering that. And now we have a survey out confirming it. You can't recreate what we have here in California. If you want to say you're right.
If I may just chime in my 2 cents on the economics and, civic development and whatnot, I think Elon could turn Texas into a California. It would take all of his money. So, like, the wealthiest man in the world would no longer be the wealthiest man in the world. He would, however, be single-handedly responsible for making it so Texas could have a Silicon Valley. It would take a few decades of pumping money in all over the entirety of Texas, so that you can create the chain and the supply chain, and also a lot of demand for where you're going to be having your hub, your new Silicon Valley, shall we say. But yeah, it would take literally everything he has. He would have to stop all SpaceX Mars endeavors. Like, everything would just be to fund turning Texas into California. That's not really so feasible. And I'm pretty sure any and all of his shareholders would be like, no, Elon, you better not do that. We want to see our dividends.
I don't think you could pull it off even with all the money. You'd still have to change Texas culture to California culture. That'll never happen. Half my family's from Texas. You'd still have to change the weather in Texas to be like LA in the Bay Area. That'll never happen. So there's 2 factors there that just, and you'd still have to get all these immigrants and minorities and creative people thinking to go to Texas, where they just ban the ability to get an abortion. That'll never happen. Those are cultural.
Yeah, now see, that's
transport them.
That's part of what I'm talking about, though. Like, Elon would have to stop saying or having the attitude of, I'm not in politics, I don't like politics, I don't want to be in politics, right? When you're the wealthiest person in the world, guess what? You're also in politics. No matter what else you do, you're in politics, because your money single-handedly funds entire nations' GDPs. There are countries with a GDP smaller than what Elon makes in a day. Come on. You're in politics, whether you want it or not, whether you know it or not. You're in it. And so at that point, he needs to stop his refusing to choose a side thing, right? And he'll need to decide in favor of, well, what's going to help Texas become the new Silicon Valley of the world? Well, he would have to buy legislators. He would basically have to buy up most of Texas, like totally, like, illegal, but it happens all throughout America all the time. They're called like corporate sponsors and lobbyists. Just saying. And this is coming from one of the state electors. So
yeah, that's not dealing with cultural issues. You
well, yeah. So he would have to. He would have to build it up. He would have to change things. This is why I said it's going to be like 30 years or so.
You're saying because change the culture of Texas?
With like 3 decades. Give him 3 decades, all of his money, all of his time, all of the manpower that he has access to. And I think he could. It wouldn't really be exactly the same, but I think that that's what it would take, an otherworldly effort in order to actually make this dream of Texas is the new Silicon Valley of the world. So yeah, it's not feasible, and I agree that you're right. It can't happen. We just covered like all of the ridiculousness that would need to go down in order to make it happen.
I mean, Texas has a habit of being their own culture and resisting what outsiders think they should do. That goes back to the 1850s.
Yeah,
Elon Musk
and that's,
hey, we need to change, and they're going to go, you're a carpetbagger. Get out. We don't put up with that. They really don't like outsiders coming in and changing their culture. They literally have it on bumper stickers.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, there's a culture of you outsiders don't tell us what to do. He'd have to fight that too. I mean, it's a huge, huge uphill battle culturally.
Yeah, well, you know, he does have something going for him in that he's not actually racist. He is a white South African, though. I mean, dude's African. He was born and raised in South Africa.
True.
In Africa. He is African.
Yes.
And he's not really racist.
I don't believe
but, but there are people who say, you know, like those conspiracy theorists who say that aliens built the pyramids. There are also people who say that Elon, like, destroyed South Africa. I mean, never gonna be able to remind them about Kruger and the Kruger End and, you know, the people who actually, like, you know, upheld apartheid in South Africa and committed genocide and embezzled the entirety of the national fund of South Africa. You know, that's part of history. But, like, Elon gets blamed for it. Why? Because he's the wealthiest man in the world, and he is a white man from South Africa.
And true. And that's not fair. He shouldn't be blamed.
And so a lot of Texans would probably already be on board with him. Yeah, see, I told you. I ain't a racist either. People say that same thing about me. They got no proof. And, you know, I'm sure there are tons.
Yeah, those people who talk like that are racist. My family's from Texas. People who talk like that are racist. I'm going to directly call that out right now. The other thing is that while it's unfair to say that he himself is racist because of his background, obviously he's anti-racist. He left South Africa because of the apartheid state. It looks exceptionally white privileged, white ignorance to say, I'm going to leave California and go to Texas, and it'll be just fine for everybody who doesn't have white skin like me. That was ignorant.
Oh, yeah.
And he still acts like that and go, I don't know why all the Mexicans and Asians and Indian people didn't follow me to Texas. I mean, they just changed the law so that Mexicans will die dead in the fields, and they have a history of racism that blows away anything California has. But why didn't all the minorities follow me? That's just so weird. You sound white. Let me finish.
Yeah.
You sound white, ignorant as hell, sir. I don't believe that you're a racist, but I think you really just came across as white people don't get it what it's like to not be a white person in America. Like, you just so totally don't get it. And it totally came across when you did the interview where you're looking like a deer caught in the headlights going, I don't know why everybody didn't follow me. 90% of the Silicon Valley is minority. Why didn't they all follow me to racist ass Texas? You sound ignorant as hell, sir. You sound like you're completely unaware of racial dynamics and like you basically should not be involved in the conversation at all.
Well, and I do agree in part, and I think it has a lot to do with his stance of, I don't want anything to do with politics. And
No,
like I said,
it's
when
cultural.
you're that wealthy, there is no choice. So with him, he like won't pay attention to a lot of the stuff that you and I pay attention to. And when you and I pay attention to a lot of it, it's not because we believe it wholeheartedly. It's not because we're excited and happy about this, news story of, 7 more people shot and killed in a mall or whatever. Um, we pay attention to it because there is always something to learn from it. There's always something that can be learned so that something can be done differently, better, whatever. That's because we're totally in politics and we think about legislation and legality and all of that. Legality versus morality, legality coupled with morality and ethics, right? And how to legislate with all of that in mind as your compass. He's really not interested in that. And so he doesn't pay attention to a lot of the stuff. And so he misses a lot of things. And so I would say, yeah, I wouldn't actually be surprised if he didn't know that they just changed a law that's like, if the migrant worker dies in the field, just leave him there, let him, fertilize the fields, which is totally disgusting and contaminates food to the point where no human being should consume it. But, I don't really, I'm not wondering how it is that he wouldn't know that. I think it makes perfect sense that he wouldn't know that because he doesn't care to know stuff like that.
I think that's right there. And I think that's makes him a bad Californian.
Oh yeah, I agree it's very privileged. And I think that he would definitely need to do a perfect 180 on that if he's going to try to do anything other than what he's already doing.
There's no way in hell that if you had eyeballs and you were aware, you didn't get that California is a bastion of diversity because America's not. There's also no way in hell if you lived here that you didn't understand that Texas is the total opposite of viewing diversity than we are. And there's no way in hell that if you grew up as a brown-skinned man in America, I don't care how many billions you had, you would have thought that's cool. It was white ignorance, and he really displayed it, and he looks permanently bad because of it. There's no way out of this. It's like, oh, he didn't care. Bro, if you were a minority, you never would have done it. And if you knew California culture in America, you never would have done it, and you never would have acted. And if you did, you never would have acted like it'll be fine. You would have said, I know there's going to be some racial issues. I hope people can get over it. You acted like you had no idea. And then you were caught deer in the headlights afterwards. It was as ignorant as when Gavin Newsom said, why did Latin people not vote for me in the recall election? They're my voters. Right. They're also low-level workers, and you cut off their income. Just total ignorance. Total ignorance, and a lot of it's because of their skin color. I'm sorry. If they were a minority, they'd be in a better position because you don't get to live ignorantly as a minority in California. You get racially profiled, you get rewarded of it. And I know I'm not picking on white people because a lot of white people in California get this. I'm saying when white people in California don't get this, I don't look up to you. And I'm going to call you out, Governor Newsom, Elon Musk. You need to do better if you're going to represent us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I agree there. And again, Elon, as the wealthiest person in the world, is in politics, whether he wants it, knows it, likes it, or not. And therefore, he really should. I agree. He should do things differently, start thinking differently. I don't see that really happening. He did strike me the one time I met him as a very much this is the one and only time I will offer this, and then it will be closed forever. And even if I wanted for 1 second to reopen the offer, I'm still not going to, based on the principle that I told you it was only this one time.
Sure.
Which is kind of a little bit bratty, I guess one could say.
It
It's a little
sounds
bit
like someone
odd
who wants
glitter.
to play God.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Someone who has more power than they know what to do with, and they know it.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I like the guy. I think he's great. I think he epitomized the California spirit when he was in Silicon Valley. Experiment, be bold, bring automotive. Oh, you can't make the car industry work again? Yeah, I can. I can do anything. That's totally California. I just thought when you start acting like, why didn't minorities do this? It's because you don't understand minorities, and you should be ashamed of yourself if you're from California and you do that. Everyone here should. I mean, I'm in Fresno. All my white friends know how to speak Spanish better than me. So I'll just leave it there. And look at you, Jason. Like, I'm not even going to get into you, Jason. You're Mr. Diversity. So whatever. Let's move on. Here's the next thing. That was not a criticism against white people. That was criticism against non-California culture. So here's the next thing. Joe Matthews, one of our favorite guys, he's talked about Calexit. He's actually wrote a couple articles suggesting Calexit. And he has an article out where he says, why don't we just skip on having national sports teams? California should just make its own national sports team of just California schools, and we don't have to participate in an American sports team. We'll have our like own inter-California national sports team. Basically, California nationalism on display. Yes, collapse the Pac-12 conference with 8 schools departing for conferences with better TV contracts leaves you to toe without a home for your sports team, but your desperate appeals to join the Atlantic Coast Conference are pathetic and a crime against geography. And when that doesn't work, our Atlantic schools don't want to share TV sports revenues with West Coast interlopers. What next? Playing in the Arab League? Instead, why not take a breath? Take a good look at your home state. Do that, and you'll see your best athletic futures are right here in California. You can make the California Conference. It's feasible. Football is the revenue machine behind college sports, and California has 11 universities to play in the highest division, including Fresno State. Hey. So basically, he's talking about, these other national sports leagues are getting competitive and greedy. Screw them. We're California. We could do our own thing here. That's California nationalism. Thoughts, feelings?
yeah. When I first read this article, I thought to myself, "Wow, it." And now like you said, we're familiar with Joe Matthews, and we've got a decent rapport with the guy. We got a decent opinion of him. Um, I I do have to say it does kind of strike me as interesting because before he had said something in one of his articles that really sounded to us at the time like he was saying that the California independence movement would really like be a great thing or something. And what it turned out to be was he kind of like switched back and was like, no, that's not what I was saying. I am not for it. And so hearing him coming out again, out of the woodwork, just kind of randomly. I mean, not so randomly because it's sports stuff and, sports season and he's talking sports. But he really does strike me as a California nationalist, someone who views California as its own entity and maybe even views himself maybe possibly more as a Californian than American. And that's because like here he is coming out of the woodwork with something that's so California.
2023, and then there's another one, 2021. Big promoter for Calexit. Now coming out with another California nationalist take. Coincidence? So That's him. He promoted Calexit, said there was good reasons for California to be a nation. He may have walked it back too, but he also explored the idea. And now here he is saying, let's ignore America and have our own California-owned national sports league.
Yeah, and so the fact that he would, in previous years, kind of flirt around or seemingly flirt around with the idea of California independence, and then when asked very clearly, double down on, oh no, that is not what I was saying. And then after this return to decency has proven to be yet another Trump, just a different shade of Trump.
Thank you.
Then all of a sudden he's coming back out, seemingly flirting with California independence, or at least California national identity, and at the same time pointing out that Americans and Californians think very differently. And just looking at the world of sports, America's college sports stuff does not like California college sports stuff. They vilify California sports stuff. And when they have to share money with California sports teams and groups and programs and universities, they really, really go hard on getting vocal against Californians and California values. And that's when that typical, they're going to break off and fall into the ocean thing, which those of us who understand science, we know that's the opposite way of the way that the tectonic plates are going. Literally, the Earth would have to start spinning backwards, just, all of a sudden. But yeah, that's usually when that whole thing comes out. And, I get it. People who are really into sports are really, really, really into sports. And can get very heated and passionate and emphatic. Hey, I'm a very emphatic person myself, so I feel it. But at the same time, espousing hatred, kind of not healthy. And I think Joe Matthews here kind of sees that. And I think Mr. Matthews here kind of realizes that Californians and California are different, at the very least, in the world of college sports, are very much different from one another. And that for Californians, like Mr. Matthews has broken down, for Californians, the best thing to do, the safest thing to do, might actually be to separate our, at the very least, college sports. Almost like a national divorce of sports. National sports divorce. Maybe we can get that hashtag going. We started national divorce, and then Marjorie Taylor Greene picked it up, and now everyone knows it. And thinks that it was made by Marjorie Taylor Greene, which, hey, Representative Taylor Greene, that's great that you were able to take a message that wasn't yours and carry it home to the finish line. But, wow, kind of missed the mark. It was never a idea of red group and blue group. It was more of this thing that we call a singular entity doesn't really work anymore, and whatever team you're on, red, blue, if you're part of the 40 to 60% of American voters, the actual largest demographic of American voters, who have no party preference or a third party preference, basically FU red and blue. The no blue or red team. If you're part of that, then you can really see how like this whole thing is kind of failing, and each individual entity could probably do better for its own people than the overall larger entity, just because the overall larger entity is mostly hell-bent focused on like providing Ukraine with weapons and money, and not caring about accountability and like how many more mansions has Zelensky bought with our taxpayer dollars, and how close is World War III and nuclear holocaust really. The American federal government's mostly just focused on Ukraine right now, to the point where Hawaii, was that Illinois, Lebanon, that they had that train disaster spill. Oh, okay, yeah. It seems like everywhere that there is a major disaster, everywhere where American citizens and taxpayers and voters of the United States of America are at and are in trouble, there's Joe Biden getting on a plane to somewhere else. He's in Hanoi right now. Isn't there a big ass hurricane coming up the East Coast? Again, like another one. They just got bombarded, and then now they're getting another one, right? And this is why I don't ever want to live over in like Florida, because hurricane season, where you get multiple hurricanes. Yeah, no, thank you. That's not for me. If you're brave enough to live there and like survive it out, like, hey, more power to you. I will virtually give you some props, some kudos right now, because y'all ain't ever gonna catch me going over there and facing down a hurricane. That's kind of crazy to me. I get it. People live with it. At the same time, they still need help. And like, this is a thing that happens, and so we know they're going to need help down there this time of year. And he chooses this time to, oh, gee, they just got hit by a hurricane. There are like 4 more lining up. This next one's almost here. Yeah, let's get on a plane and go to Hanoi. Like, people asked him, are you gonna, now that it's been 100 days in office, are you gonna address the border wall and the border crisis and the kids in cages thing? And he's, oh, no, we're not concerned with that. It's fine. It's fine the way it is.
Let me cover that real quick. I want to cover this for everybody.
And then if you can, cover Hawaii and how $700 won't cover shit. And I will not bleep that out. Like,
okay. Can you not say those words again?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Just wanted to make the point.
Fair enough. Just to continue some of this, so Joe Biden continues most racist policies against Latinos by Donald Trump. So we talked about kept kids in cages, now called containers, the border wall. They continued the border wall. Refugees have to stay in Latin America or near it, and then also told Latin people not to come. So there is the article. Biden administration is forcing or considering forcing migrant families who enter the country without authorization to remain near the border in Texas while waiting asylum, effectively limiting their ability to travel within the U.S. That was kind of a Trump policy. Border wall construction resumes under President Joe Biden. Tensions rise with Biden administration as migrant kids crowd shelters. White House on defense over kids in containers. And Kamala Harris tells Guatemalan migrants, don't come to America. So all the worst policies of Trump all continued under Biden. Now back to this news. Sorry, I just wanted to cover that. So let's actually go to the next story. Or do you have more? Do you want to say something more on the California news conference? California, not news conference. Sports conference.
I would like to say to Joe Matthews very specifically, if you're out there, if you hear this, I think that I would love for you and Marcus to have a little sit down discussion. Let Marcus pick your brain. Let's really hear what is on that mind of yours, because brother, you've got a great mind for this stuff, and I wish more people would listen to you and learn what it is that you're seeing about all of this stuff. Um, I I don't even mind, Mr. Matthews, that you are not actually for California independence, very like pro out there, and
Well,
I
he
don't
claims
mind.
he is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure with the articles he writes, he's got love for California somewhere in there. Uh, I'm just saying, I think that it could be a golden opportunity for Californians in general to hear more of what's on Mr. Matthews' mind. Because I like what I hear, and like this is what we do for a living, right? So I I really think that we should try that. Also, I would love to see a California conference. I'm not huge on sports. I used to play lots of soccer, or as the rest of the world outside of America calls it, football. Um, Used to play that a lot as a kid, but I played baseball, football, soccer, basketball, whole bunch of sports, tennis, volleyball, you name it. Um, I think that California, with how much diversity of terrain, geographical location, uh, everything, that like we could have our own cross country, like Olymp- Olympics have been held in California, and they've held like the full gambit, right? Like you can do everything from um, the cross country skiing where you're target shooting up by Lake Tahoe and like in the Tahoe National Forest. You can do desert sports down in the Mojave Desert outside of Los Angeles. You can do all sorts of water sports along our humongous ocean coastline, or in the thousands of lakes that we've got, right? um, like pretty much anything, winter sports, summer sports, you name it, whatever sports, we could be doing it as a California thing, and not as a way to snub others, just as a way to kind of really protect California sports a little bit better, because we get trampled on so hard, and not on the scoreboard, just like, in general, like online people trashing on it, saying all sorts of stuff. So I would love to see it. I think Joe Matthews has a great vision there.
Okay, we're going to go to another piece of news here. As soon as I get the computer to move. Okay, it's thinking about it. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Here we go. This is the next section you wanted to cover. Federal government will not be there to help in a disaster. This is the other thing Jason was pointing out. President Biden said there's going to be a $700 check to Hawaii fire victims, and it was slammed as a slap in the face. President earns even more criticism for being out of touch following his Maui stop, riddled by uncomfortable moments. So he wasn't even going to visit Hawaii. Then there was so much criticism that forced him to visit Hawaii. And it was all very kind of curtailed and controlled who he actually interacted with. And he was out of there in a second before anyone really met him. And they're only going to get $700 per person in Hawaii for one-time payment for all the disaster. However, at the same time that this happened, America sent another $600 million to Ukraine. That's September 7th. So Americans get $700 per person if you've had family members burned alive or burned down and your property's destroyed and you're distraught and maybe you're under medical issues. $700 total. That's all America's going to do to help you out. But we will send $600 million to Ukraine at the same time. But we won't spend that money on Americans. And I'd remind everybody of the time that they had the bill to, I think it was provide $40 billion in assistance to small businesses who were hurt during COVID. And they decided to not pass that on the exact same day that they passed a bill giving $40 billion to Ukraine. So this is the second time where Americans have been in need, hurt badly, need assistance. And the federal government said, no, a foreign war is more important than taking care of our own people. We did this with the $40 billion for small businesses hurt by COVID, and now we're doing it with the Hawaii fire victims. So this is a pattern. And Californians can absolutely expect this to happen to us. We always say, oh, if there's a disaster, we need the big bad federal government to be there to help us. Why? They won't be there. Do you remember this thing called Katrina and how horrible the federal government did at that? Do you also remember this thing called the hurricanes that hit New Jersey and how horrible the federal government did at fixing that? I mean, they don't fix these problems. Do you remember a place called Flint, Michigan, and they still can't get the drinking water fixed? Do you remember a place called Palestine, Ohio, and they still can't fix that railway issue? I mean, it's turning into a country where things get broke, people get hurt, and the federal government just, they can't do it. Palestine, Ohio, the New Jersey hurricanes, Katrina, Hawaii, business people. It's a pattern, right? It's a pattern. Jason?
Yeah, sorry, the microphone issue. Trying to unmute. Yeah, no, that is exactly it right there. Is the federal government has failed the people and continues to fail the people at every possible turn. When we demand, right, something happens, we get the cold shoulder. We then make a large enough outcry and demand some sort of action. And what we get is the most menial of half measure possible. And then they go above and beyond for the people who are making them money. They go above and beyond to make sure that the government, legislators will sign off on these lucrative contracts, weapons contracts and whatnot. And then, there was that report that showed what senators, representatives, and other elected officials are holding what stocks in what companies, and how do those companies align with what those individuals have campaigned on, like how many green or green-leaning Democrats have actually bought into big oil and regularly vote for big oil stuff and against green energy stuff. And then you look at like, oh, well, they own stock in like Raytheon, Halliburton, and Exxon Mobil. So no wonder they're so pro-war and oil with their votes, even though they campaign on, we're going to make everything green and clean and pave the way for the future generations so that they don't have to, they're great at selling it, great at telling you what you want to hear, and then also great at going and voting the exact opposite way of what most of us who voted them into power would want them to vote for. So they fail at every turn, and it's not because they're dumb, it's because they're bad. It's not ineptitude.
Right.
This is a conscious decision.
Right. Right. It's not it's not stupid. It's intentional. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good point.
which it's like that classic argument, wow, are you just that dumb? Or you really want to make legislation that's like actually against the law? Normally when we come up on that, that's our stance, right? Is like, wow, you're trying to make law that is against the law. Are you just dumb? Do you just not know? How did you even get elected? Um, when it comes to the case of the federal government in general, in concern to the people, it is very much different. It's no, they're not just dumb. This is how it goes. This is how it's gone since before I was born. Right now, we have the nephew of JFK trying to run and replace Biden. It's like he can see that Biden's not really the return to decency. And sure, RFK Jr. has some things that some of us aren't really so
I'm
thrilled about.
not
He's
okay with what he said
it,
about Jewish people at all.
right.
At
I'm
all.
just saying. I'm yeah, and I'm not either, right? And like at the same time, we should also admit Biden, Trump, Harris, Obama, Bush, Bush 1 and Bush 2, Rumsfeld, Cheney, right? All of these people, Pelosi, it doesn't matter who. If they're in the federal government, they have probably also said things like this and held belief like this. And
okay, I just got to say this because you're bringing them up, and I don't want to have to deal with the answer. So Robert Kennedy said that it looked like the COVID-19 was designed to not hurt Jewish people and Chinese people, which gets back to classic tropes again of horrible anti-Semitism. Of they have this cabal and they run the whole world. And then when he was asked about it, he doubled down on it. I don't support the other politicians, but no, none of them but Trump have done anything like that. Said that and then said, "Hell yeah, I meant it." That's unique to him. So that's all I'll say.
That's a good point. That is a fair point.
Horrible.
I was more just trying to point to the fact that like he is a Democrat leaning political figure who is trying to replace Biden because he sees that Biden is failing and Biden's not popular and Biden hasn't delivered on the things, right?
Sure.
That was all I was trying to point at. And also trying to say like, and don't get me wrong, I know there are things that we don't like about that he has said that we're like, what in the actual foxtrot? But that all aside, it shows that even within the blue team of the federal American politician circles, people are seeing that Biden is a failure. I don't think RFK Jr. would readily get involved and try to get into the government that assassinated his uncle and his father if it wasn't, wow, this is a massive failure and I think I can help.
Yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah, so I'm going to show you two more articles that back up the point. As you can see right now, if you're looking at the screen, you can see articles talking about how the Senate blocked $48 billion to small businesses on the same day they passed $40 billion to Ukraine. The right above that is looking at the Hawaii fire victims. So they only got about $700, while another $600 went to Ukraine. We have two more articles coming up here. One second. Give me a second here to get the computer to work.
Yeah, I am gonna have to go in just a second.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead and finish your point. I'm just putting up some articles showing Flint, Michigan is still a problem, and East Palestine residents is still a problem. Backing up the point that we were talking about, how it just seems like the federal government can't fix anything. It just can't do it. It can't take care of Americans. Um,
Yeah, and that's kind of ultimately my point with bringing up RFK is like not whether or not I support him, because I'm not, I'm an elector, so I'm not supporting any individual candidate. I am not using my vote for my personal beliefs. This next voting cycle, I will be casting a vote within the Electoral College representative of people in the voting district that I'm in here in Oregon now. And that's because I believe in, this democratic process, and that the people really deserve to be adequately represented. I think that there are some people still who are out there who also view things that way, or see things in that similar kind of a heart mind set. They're looking at life in America through that lens. I think RFK Jr. might potentially be seeing America through that lens of this democracy should be working for the people, and the people deserve to be better represented. He's got his ideas on how to do it, right? Just like we all do, at least those of us in politics. Whether or not I support it, or Marcus supports it, or whether or not any of you viewers, listeners support it, right? That is a whole different cup of tea. And each individual one of us, if we vote, it's up to us to really do our due diligence and make sure that the vote that we are casting is representative of what we're wanting.
Yeah.
So that's why I try to never tell anyone, I think you should vote this way, right? I was totally for Senator Bernard Sanders before the DNC undermined him, much like they're most likely going to do to RFK.
He also
Yeah. And like, again, there are things that I didn't like about Senator Sanders. The way he rolled over to the DNC just pissed me off. And a lot of other voters my age and younger too. No one's perfect, right? And even still, when I wanted to see Senator Sanders win, I even cast a vote for him. I never went out and told people, I think you should vote, or, you definitely should vote for him, or I think you shouldn't vote if you're not going to vote for him, right? Never once, because I think that everyone who wants to vote should. I think if you really want it, that's what should, what it should be contingent upon, not your citizenship status or how much money you pay in taxes. Or I think it should be, if you're here in America and you actually want to partake in the system, it should be allowed, because most people don't want to partake in the system. That's why, voting has just been so horrible. It's, I mean, they got a decent turnout to vote down Trump, but they didn't get that turnout to vote for Biden. They got it to just make sure Trump didn't get back in that time.
barely.
Yeah, barely. And, the way that whole thing is going down in Georgia, and it's looking more and more like
even worse. I can't believe the other stuff you told me the other day. I thank
right?
you for keeping me up to date on the stuff in Georgia. It's just ridiculous. And I was really pleased when you told me about how Breaking Point said the same thing, which is our attitude. If you want to get Trump, get him. Not saying he's a good dude, but don't play games. My God, don't play games right now. Not
Yeah,
with
right.
this much tension and this much pressure. And your thing, and I have friends who like Trump and go, okay, but if you're going to take him down, I get it. But it had to be airtight. Airtight. Every I dotted, every T crossed, and they are not doing that.
Exactly.
It's gonna go
And
no
then
place good. It's gonna go no place good.
there's some like really rookie level moves that
Yeah.
have been made. That's like, okay, I thought that we had our best people on this and that we were going to make sure that this was done in the best and tightest possible way so that it would actually stick. If you go about it breaking the law, guess what? He is going to be immune from any prosecution after they throw it out because you broke the law in order to be able to charge him. You broke the law to get the evidence, so the evidence is no longer admissible. Therefore, you have no admissible evidence to prove his crime. If you mess it up while you're pursuing it, he will get off scot-free, and there's nothing you can do to charge him for it after. So it's even more pertinent to get it right, to do it right. And they have not been, which just makes it more scary for those of us who have LGBTQIA friends and family, or maybe don't see exactingly eye to eye with certain groups within the federal government. Or maybe they're like you and myself, where we're like, yeah, goodbye red, goodbye blue. We don't want either of you. But you know, if they don't do this right and he gets off scot-free, his voting base starts between 40 and 45%, somewhere around there. So he doesn't have to do a whole lot of work to get over that threshold to win the election. Biden's popularity, voter popularity threshold starts in the 20s.
Yeah.
That is horrific.
Below Trump now.
Yeah. And like, even with the stuff he said, RFK is gaining popularity against Biden.
That's true.
Even with the things he's said, that tells you how bad the country views Biden. And this is the guy the DNC is likely going to put up against Trump. Remember, Hillary Clinton's popularity was roughly similar, and she got mopped.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say the election was stolen. But you know who else we hear that from?
And we know that now.
I know. You know who else we hear that from? Trumpers. Right. So I'm not buying it, Camp Clinton. And I'm not.
Yeah. It's not fair. Much they talk about how America hated Trump. America equally hates Biden, and America equally hated Clinton at one point. And if you see them on the news, it's like, well, these people represent America. And I'm like, no, they don't. None of those people had over half the population like them, or at least close to half the population. I'd give you close these days, but they don't even have that. So let's go to another piece of news. Jason showed this to me. When Jason comes back, we'll get back into it. So Jason found this. This is on Twitter. And it's DK or at one Nick Dar. So at one Nick Dar. That's where you can find him. And it's, what state would you never move to? At one NICDAR. At one capital N lowercase ICDAR. So @1 Nick Dar. What state would you never move to? California, 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 New York. Any other blue state but Michigan, which is California, 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 Cali, California, Glad, Vermont, California, 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 Communist State of California, 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 then New York, California, 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 or New York, California, New York, or California. It's a toss up between California, New York, California, Cali. So once again, we do these where we show America hates California. And they go, well, how would California actually become independent? Well, the fact is that a majority of America does not like California. We've done shows on this before. Here's another update from a tweet. What state would you never move to? Kind of tongue in cheek. And a majority of the people in America, across America, saying, get rid of California. Yeah, New York makes a good showing, but nowhere near California. So if there was a vote for Calexit, we have the votes because a lot of America hates us. It's still there. Never changed. Okay, final story for today. Federal court blocks California laws to keep us safe and alive. And this is another thing that we've been talking about, where because we're California, we're liberal, we have a lot of our progressive laws that we have to keep us safe struck down by federal courts that are more conservative than we are. We've covered this famously. A lot of California laws are struck down. So the Ninth Circuit Court, which is the lower federal court that oversees California, the Ninth Circuit is right below the Supreme Court. Ninth Circuit Court threatens California ban on unlicensed open carry of handguns. California laws banning people from openly carrying handguns in public without a license are under great legal threat after the federal appellate court decision Thursday. Conservative three-judge panel found the lower court abused its discretion when it declined to halt state enforcement of the laws while their constitutionality is being challenged. Higher court's rulings do not conclude that enforcement should be halted, instead sending the case back to lower district court for another analysis. However, it did provide instructions on how that analysis should be conducted, with language that will make it more difficult for the state to prove its laws are constitutional, legal experts say. The case Baird versus Bonta, after Rob Bonta, the current California Attorney General, is one many challenges California gun laws. So the Bruin test has become known as the case of the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, radically altered the legal process by which gun regulations are scrutinized with individuals challenge them as unconstitutional. Rather than considering the public good of such gun laws, courts are now weighing whether laws aimed at governing modern firearms like assault rifles are sufficiently similar enough to centuries-old weapons laws to be considered historical and therefore constitutional. So, Ninth Circuit Court stops our ability to make sure that people who don't have a license can't carry guns in public. That's what they're talking about. Because in other states, people can just carry guns. In California, we've had so many shootings. We don't want people to just carry guns around. So this Ninth Circuit Court is looking at it going, I don't know, California, if you have the ability to say that people without licenses can't carry guns around in open public. That's ridiculous. That's a horrible idea for here. And yet these laws, which we put in place to protect ourselves from gun violence, which we suffer from, we have a lot of mass shootings here, are constantly struck down or hindered by the federal courts. Something we've always told you about. So federal courts do not allow California to have the laws that we need while we're here. Since not a good reason for us to be in the, it's a problem being part of the U.S. Additionally, if we wanted to leave, there's a lot of Americans who simply hate us in California. Finally, it's not abnormal to think that California acts like a nation. Here's another major California reporter saying, let's have our own national sports team. That's California nationalism. Finally, when we look at the federal government as their partner and they say, well, Trump was horrible, but now it's Biden, what's the difference? California's majority Latino. We're for diversity. And yet we have a Democratic administration that does all the same racist things as the Republican administration. How's that a government to feel secure in as a Californian? Maybe we should look at doing our own thing, as Joe Matthews suggested, especially when we're talking about how we may not have our own ability to have reasonable gun safety laws because they're struck down by conservatives. Maybe it's time for us to embrace the idea that we are hated by a majority of America and ask them to let us go with a simple legal constitutional vote. Well, that's it for our roundup. Thanks for joining us. You can catch us more often here, the National Divorce Interview Series. Every week we have interviews with writers, professors, politicians, key thinkers on political polarization. We have the largest series of interviews with experts on political polarization of any university or organization or nonprofit in all of America. That's right. Just us here. We did it again. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And we will see you soon. Let me get to the beginning. And Calexit LLC, containing members of the Yes California Calexit Congress, I want to say good night and see you soon.